What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 348. My name's Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Right.
Who's next? Perhaps you.
That's a long first name.
And John. John.
Hey, John. Hey, Ron. Good to see you both. What's coming up on this episode today? What do we got planned? Anybody want to jump in and tell our listeners?
Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, that's right. That was John's required viewing pick.
You just did way more of a
did
voice.
The Crypt Keeper. Yeah, you did the Crypt Keeper version, which is going to really fuck people up.
Which is crazy because he is the Crypt Keeper. He's called
the Crypt Keeper.
He is. Yeah.
But he's not the Crypt Keeper that we've come to know.
Well, it makes me think that, okay, one of two things. One is this guy, like 20 years later, looks a lot worse and he's making a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
The other is that Crypt Keeper is kind of like, you're not always the Crypt Keeper. And maybe some guys are in the job for like a few months and some are in the job for a few decades. Like it could be like one of those positions that people cycle through.
Yeah.
And so maybe Ralph Richardson was like interim Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
And they had, because they had to get a corpse back in there, somebody with some puns,
Yeah.
Not a single pun from Ralph Richardson's Crypt Keeper, from Tales from the Crypt, 1972, which was our required viewing this week.
I think he was trying to make a pun when he said eternal damnation or something like that.
But that's not really a pun. That's right down the middle.
No, but he lined it up. He's like...
Well, no, you're right. He emphasized it.
Damn.
He was like,
damn,
eternal damnation.
Anyway, yeah, I'm excited to talk about that movie.
Yeah, so we've got that. And then we all have seen the first episode of Severance, season 2.
Yes.
And I think we were going to keep it lean and mean this week that. Yeah. But I did also want to mention something that has been all over my feed and all over, I'm sure, most film lovers' feeds for the last week, which is the death of David Lynch and the aftermath of David Lynch and the outpouring of, love and anecdotes and people that have worked with him sharing stories and people that have been shaped by his work or influenced by his work, which really seems to cross a lot of generations. It reminded me of like when David Bowie died or when Prince died, these people who you didn't really think about as getting old because they almost seem like immortal aliens from some other place or they're so specific. Yeah. You didn't really think of them as people that were beginning to show their age or that might have physical ailments or anything like that. I mean, I'm not saying I was that naive. I'm just saying it snuck up on us. And I think that like it was similar after David Bowie died and to a lesser extent after Prince died, where it was like my feed was just full of people that were like, oh shit, the universe just got a lot less cool without this person in it. And, David Lynch is somebody who, I don't know, I've thought about his work on and off ever since I've been exposed to it, just because he's created some really lasting images and made some really interesting things and had a kind of career that not a lot of filmmakers have, where he's kind of recognized as, love him or hate him, he's an artist. And he's one of the few like name filmmakers that I think most people can name, whose name almost is synonymous with, some people would say weirdness, but I think people that know his work would say more like a dreamlike quality or just like images that are not always linear and explained by plot, but have more to do with like sort of subconscious associations that we make. And I think he was really into like meditation and dreams and I don't know, just a really interesting guy. So I thought, I think I might be the biggest David Lynch head on the podcast, but I was just going to throw it to you guys and see if you had any favorite selections from him or thoughts about his passing, or if maybe you just noticed the same thing I did, that it was like, oh, it was kind of nice in this last week with all the terrible news to have this little swirl of people celebrating an artist.
I'd say I'm probably the newest Lynch fan of everyone. I really haven't seen a ton of his movies. And then I'm looking at his, maybe I have. I'm like looking at his filmography.
He didn't make that many.
Yeah, so I've seen Mulholland Drive, which I thought was a masterpiece. Blue Velvet when I was younger, and I don't remember a ton about it. But there's a big one. that I have a 4K copy of, thanks to Arrow Video, and that's Dune. You know, and that to me was to the fact that he tried to make the impossible, unmakeable film into a film that a lot of people liked. I don't know why, you know, it's had kind of a cult following. I know that it didn't hit right when it first came out, but
I think it has aspects that people admire. You know what I mean? I think that there's lots to admire about it. Maybe I think the set design and some of that stuff is incredible. But no, it's one of the reasons why people were so excited about Denis Villeneuve's Dune was because it was a chance to see it done again with, you know, a little bit more. I mean, you know, whatever you want to say about modern effects and stuff. But I think you're right. There's a lot of people who have a lot of affection for Dune. It's the one he kind of disavows, though. It's like, you know, it makes him sad to talk about Dune, or it made him sad to talk about Dune. It just feels like it got away from him, you know. I think that it was to him the one where he failed to make the movie he wanted to make.
I could see that, honestly. It's the bigger the story, the more studio interference, the weirder it gets, you know. So I definitely understand, but I hope he understood that people love that, especially in the last couple years. As you know, the quality and there's like all these, like, if you get the 4K, there's like all these essays and guest commentaries underneath it. People really love that movie, and it's funny. I didn't think about it until just now. I own a David Lynch movie that I'm really proud to own. It's one of the ones that I break out. I'm like, hey, have you seen the original Dune movie as directed by David Lynch? So, you know, I'm just really happy to have seen and not even think about it in that way. I guess that's a cool part about somebody that's that talented, that you can ingest something and not even, like, you know, have it a part of you and not even think about it until it comes up. Like, it's just like it's like a quality brand name. You know, they say you don't think about a good brand name. You just put it on your body and wear it out. You know, I think about that a lot with good movies. You know, sometimes I don't think about necessarily how and why and how something came to me, but the fact that it's a part of me now is really cool, you know, and I guess this makes me proud.
What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you know, the movies that Ronald mentioned are probably the ones I most associate with. Like, also really like The Straight Story. But I think probably the more consistent one, even through decades, even with the recent, you know, version of it that came out, the series for Twin Peaks, is really kind of what, you know, I think I most associate with him of something that I've watched, you know, like more than once, and, you know, the cultural impact that they had at kind of like a formative part of my life, you know, in the early 90s. Kind of, I saw it maybe the year after it really kind of hit, but, you know, and when it came back a few years ago for the return, you know, it was really exciting to watch that and fun, and definitely probably what I most associate him with, mainly because of when it hit me, you know, the first series run. But yeah, I don't know, like, I don't know that overall, like, I'm a huge of his entire filmography. I haven't seen many of his films or some of his films, but definitely what John mentioned earlier is just like a filmmaker, a creator, an artist who just definitely, the reputation was earned and was very unique. And yeah, that dreamlike state that you kind of mentioned is absolutely accurate. And anything I feel like I've experienced of his, that's definitely what stays with you. So it's like, yeah, somebody who's made that kind of impact and, you know, kind of contributed that much to the kind of things that we talk about all the time. It's sad to see somebody, you know, but to leave, but, you know, you look at his filmography and what he did, and there's no doubt, like you say, he didn't do a ton, but he kind of did do a lot, you know, with
he's always busy. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and that's impressive.
Well, I guess when I say a lot, I just mean, like, it's that kind of Kubrick-y sort of career where there might be years between projects, or a gap where if you looked at that gap, you would find out, oh, he tried to get 10 different movies off the ground in that time. Or, or he like developed some, like Mulholland Drive was being developed as a television show, and so that was a failed pilot that got turned into a movie with additional footage. Like, so he was constantly doing things like that, and I think he was always working on little things. I would say, as much as I love, his movies, many of them, I do think Twin Peaks is the real feather in the cap, just because it's so deep.
The thing, yeah.
And because with The Return, he got to do what he might have gotten to do with like 5 movies or something, as far as experimenting with weird storytelling techniques and having a couple episodes. That one episode, episode 8 of The Return, that was just an art film, basically. Right. Like it's got that long black and white sequence with, it's just an incredible thing. And the fact that was on, a mainstream cable network, airing like appointment television in the late 2010s, was like, at the time, I remember that was really special, the way that show was coming out weekly, and there was no hype, no clips released, no next week on, nothing. The descriptions that were being released about the episodes were like weird, poetic bits of dialogue from the episode, but nothing that explained what you were going to see. You had no idea who you were going to see, what characters. There were so many different things going on. I don't know. It was one of the last times in recent memory that I've just gone and received a television show that way. I was telling my wife the other day, when I read a book, if I know I'm going to read it, I don't read the back, I don't read the flap, I don't read the description. I just read it. And it's so fun to read a book or watch a movie or anything like that, not knowing what it's about to be. And I think David Lynch, at his best, was one of those people who there's no way you could know necessarily what you were going to be in for. And I think especially with Twin Peaks: The Return, it was really cool. So yeah, it's kind of what you said, Steve, like for that to be the last thing he got to make, it shows how vital he still was. Yeah. But that's a pretty major statement, and he got to put kind of a weird, creepy, eerie bow on Twin Peaks, which many people would agree, yeah, that's like the big impact. And it's like that's where we get that association of Lynchian being this, in the cliche way, people use it to describe like a dose of weirdness in something. But I think if you really know his stuff, you know that it has more to do with that kind of like humor and fear and everything that plays out in this very peculiar pace that is very unique to his stuff. So, yeah. It was cool seeing all the fun anecdotes too. He never talked about his movies. There was one anecdote I saw that was really interesting. That was at like a TMI, a transcendental meditation event that he was at, because that was a big thing he was into, and so it was a crowd of people that were into TMI. And when it got to like the Q&A portion of the thing, he was like, I never do this. He was famous for he didn't do commentaries, he didn't do interviews where he talked about his movies. Really, he was like, I don't do this. I'll answer any questions you ask me about my work. And nobody had any questions about his work because they were all there because they were big transcendental meditation heads. And so like maybe one person asked a question or whatever, but like then they went on and they talked about the, meditation. But it was just interesting that like this guy who never really, a guy who a lot of people would be dying to ask questions about his work, the one time that at least I've heard of where he was willing to answer questions, no one in the crowd was like
that's wild.
A fan of his films necessarily. So,
yeah.
Well, Steve had to step away. I don't know what we shall do.
He said continue on.
He said continue on kid issues.
Yeah.
Well, Ronald, maybe is there anything you've watched? Let's think on our feet here. You could do the thing you normally do at the end of the episode now. Just talk about some of the things you've watched.
I did see One of Them Days, the Keke Palmer and SZA slice of life comedy. It was good, man. There's something happening. My friend and I were talking about this. Like, typically, there's no other way to say it. Like, a lot of like white film critics don't really talk about small black films a lot. And for some reason, this movie is coming up a ton. I think some of it is because people are surprised that it made #1, I guess, last weekend. But then also that there's this huge gap in the market for comedies. Just like comedies that you can go to see in the movies, and people are just giving it a chance, and it seems to be this interesting wave of good reception. It's funny. It's a California based, just weird characters. Like one character is kind of a type A. Kiki Palmer is type A, just very together, and her friend is a spacey artist who gives her rent money away to her boyfriend, who's supposed to be paying the rent and doesn't. He just takes some money and invests in a t-shirt company. So they have to make some money within 24 hours or they get kicked out of the apartment. That plot's been done a couple times, but the way that they do it is just really interesting. SZA is a first-time actress. You may have heard her song All of Stars that was on the first Black Panther with Kendrick Lamar. Really good song. And Keke Palmer is just an insanely talented actress, singer, you name it, she does it. But they have this really good chemistry. A lot of famous people show up. Cat Williams, Lil Rel Howery, a couple other people, a couple of surprises. Janelle James from Abbott Elementary. So it's a fun comedy. It's slice of life. I feel like it feels very relatable. I think that's one of the cool things about it. It's like, let me see what it's on Rotten Tomatoes. It's at a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes right now.
Well, I haven't seen it, but I can echo what you said about the reception. I was thinking the same thing. Like a lot of times these small budget black, I mean, I hate to call them black comedies because black comedy is a term that denotes like a comedy with a certain morbid sensibility. I've seen people online have confusion about that when they were like, I heard this was a black comedy, and then I watched it and it was a bunch of British people. Pasty white British people. There's black British people too. But but it's like, no, I think you're right. This one for some reason has crossed over to have more critical appeal. People have been talking more about it. Where normally I'm aware of a lot of movies that are out that people aren't talking about. I guess you're the same way, just because you're plugged in, you're aware of what's coming out. But this was one where I kept hearing the name coming up. And I think Keke Palmer, she's that kind of person who you like right away, and they have a lot of energy. And a lot of times those performers don't have the juice once they get a few projects that like they start off as the wacky friend and then they end up carrying a movie and they don't quite have it. I think Keke Palmer, you said it, she is actually a really talented actor. So I don't know, sure. I have decided I will probably end up seeing this because I was like, oh, I've heard that it's pretty good, but there's a lot of whoever's in them, there's a lot of low budget comedies that I just don't end up seeing because by the time I could see them, I sort of feel like I'm like, I kind of know this. If this was good, I would have heard about it.
Right.
But no, I'm glad to hear that you're kind of supporting things I've just been hearing in general. I feel like I've heard that movie come up 5 times in the last week.
Yeah. I was also thinking, since I'm an AA24 member. Yeah, so part of the membership is you get
they
free
sent you
ticket.
the head of the little girl from Hereditary.
Oh, that would be nice.
Was that an A24 movie?
Yes,
okay,
it was.
Good.
It was.
Good. I hate when you make a joke and then you're like, wait,
no. You're spot on.
Okay,
you're spot on. I gotta show this. Damn it! I get it. How do I get it to focus?
I've tried that before. It loved the focus of your fingernail details, but it did not love the focus of your phone. But yes, The Brutalist.
So The Brutalist.
Where's it playing?
So it's playing at AMC Alamo Drafthouse in Regals, and they're giving us tickets. If you're an A24 member, you get a ticket to The Brutalist this week. So I'm probably gonna see that this weekend. I'm pretty excited about it for free.
Well, so I would say, what are you doing this weekend? But now I know what you're doing all weekend. You're watching The Brutalist.
I'm going to see The Brutalist and getting brutal.
No, I can't wait to see it. I've heard it's mind blowing in some ways, but it's one of those movies where you hear about it and you're like, how what can it be that it's so engrossing? You know what I mean? Sometimes just the story, it sounds interesting, but it doesn't. I don't know. I always let movies like that wash over me, and I almost always am like, oh, I can see how this isn't.
There's something that wouldn't wash over you.
No, I know all about it.
You don't want me to say it.
No.
Authors
you
Institution,
can say it.
aka AI.
Yeah. Two uses of it. Two uses of it.
Apparently more than people are thinking.
But I'm saying the two uses are the dialogue. One is tweaking the dialogue to make the Hungarian pronunciations more accurate because there's a lot of Hungarian spoken in the movie. And the other is his architectural designs supposedly were created with the use of that stuff. So I'm plugged in on all that stuff.
Talking about. Apparently there's more.
Well, I've heard that Adrian Brody is not real.
That would be crazy. What if there was never an Adrian Brody?
No, there never was one. You know that when he played that Rasta character on SNL that one time? That's the real guy.
A lot of mercy. That's crazy.
No, but I'm always like, I think that it's as vehemently opposed to. I don't even want to say AI as a blanket term because I know there's AI that is part of different things. Like there's different kinds of AI, but the sort that pisses me off. I mean, like, it doesn't make me not want to see a 3.5 hour movie that I'm curious about that might have a few instances of that. But it does make me think, what a weird choice when that seems like it's a big deal in a movie about an architect. If you're gonna farm out the designs to some
I don't understand why everybody's so angry about this.
I think that's kind of what I'm saying. It feels, even though I share a lot of the sentiments, the anger and the boycotting feels performative sometimes. The sort of like,
but
we're
it may
outraged.
Disqualify it. Supposedly, it may disqualify it. Like, people are so angry that it may not get nominated the way it was supposed to get nominated.
Get out of here,
Steve.
This is all done already, man. The nominations ended before this came out, so the nominations were already done.
Doesn't mean it's going to win.
You'll know tomorrow. Well, you said nominated. I mean,
well, you know who's going to vote for it, Ronald. All the robots are going to vote for it.
Yeah, of course. Nominated. I meant to say win. It may not win. It may not win because people are angry. Obviously, angry at AI. I think we should have a conversation. We should have a whole separate conversation about AI. I have some feelings about it, but I think there are some logical fears that artists have with it, and I think there's some things that people should just get more education. There's two things happening at once. I think people should just get more educated.
I think there are certain ethical questions with the use of the technology, regardless of the creative side. But I think sometimes I'm like, does it bother me to think that they tweaked the Hungarian pronunciations to make it more accurate? And it's the kind of thing where I'm like, I don't know that I'm bothered by that as much as I would be certain other things. Like I'd have to look into that. Where did they get the source recordings? That sounds like the kind of thing like where you would just train it with. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak. I just talk out of my ass about a technology that I don't know exactly what they did. But on the face of it, that doesn't sound like something that means you weren't being creative in your use of the technology. The ethics of what the technology, what information it's scraping to create its whatever, and you know that I've really studied up on it. I used the highly technical term whatever.
There's a very practical, reasonable use of it. Very recently, there's a rapper, Beanie Siegel. He got cancer in his throat, lost his ability to rap the same way. So he
shouldn't have done that.
I shouldn't have done that.
I would have told him he shouldn't have done that.
He should have done that. So they fed his vocals into AI, and then he's rapping, and then they're using the AI model to make him sound like he used to before he was afflicted. Which is, that's shit like that's pretty cool, man.
That's a perfect example of using it because you are using his voice. I'm sure they trained the thing on his voice. They have recordings of his voice. So it's like you can create, it's like what they did with John Lennon on that Beatles record where it's like,
that's weird.
You could talk about the ethics of somebody being dead and doing that. But if someone's in the room saying, let's do this, there's already pop singers who you don't know what their real fucking voices sound like anyway. Like, I don't know. Again, that's what I mean by, I hate to be like knee jerk about, because it's not about about being opposed to the technology. It's about like what kind of corners are you cutting, and are you producing something that is slop? That's the other part. Is like, anyway. Also, I think a lot of times people now use AI when they mean CGI too. Like, you might not like CGI, but a lot of times people are like, "Oh, is that AI?" And you're like, "No, that's just CGI."
Nah, you might be right. I think you're right. I think people confuse it in those, because I've heard people use it like that now that that's in the vocabulary of the people.
Well, right, like it'll be motion capture or something, and they'll say, "Is that AI?" And you're like, "No." Or that they used AI for all the characters, and you're like, "I don't think they did," but they did use motion capture. Is that what you mean? It still looked like shit, but anyway.
I love that thing, that AI video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. He posts it every couple. He posts it every couple weeks. It's just like, you're like, rah, rah, rah. It doesn't even look natural. It looks so scary, man.
Have you seen the two guys fighting? Like, they're faking an AI thing, but they're like coming out of a building and they're like fighting and like doing different things, and their arms are like twined. That was so funny. That was so funny.
Yeah, I love that. So your pick, John.
Tales from the crypt. I wonder if like the '90s Crypt Keeper watched this movie and was like, "This fucking amateur, Ralph Richardson. Isn't he like a respected stage actor?" So yeah, this is an anthology film from the '70s, and it is, it's called Tales from the Crypt. It's going to be kind of schlocky. I think all the stories in this were comic book stories from, I want to say it was Vault of Horror was the name of the comic that the stories came from. But this movie is presented, it's the anthology format where you have a wraparound and you have a story that kind of develops with the characters, and you're kind of wondering why they're all in the place that they are in, but you can tell. Like, I love the way the movie starts in the catacombs. I thought it was actually kind of cool the way like they fall behind the tour group and they go into a weird chamber. That was really a cool, creepy idea. And I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting, simple setup. And I do think it's then very funny that it's really like Ralph Richardson was not the actual Crypt Keeper, but just the stand-in they had that day, who was like just sitting there, but he's wearing like the hood, but he's not doing too much of a voice. No. He's playing something, but he's definitely not playing the same version of the Crypt Keeper that we know. There's really not even much of a comparison as far as that goes, as far as the sort of personality. But the fact that he's there to intro these tales of comeuppance for these people that have, seemingly been on a tour and then wandered into the wrong room, but we come to find that perhaps they're there for another purpose. You can see that format coming, but I do think a 90-minute movie with 5 of these stories in it, it was kind of impossible to get too bogged down with anything. And the stories were nasty enough, and interesting. I will say this movie might have the fakest blood that any movie has ever had in it, mainly because blood is such a major plot point, at least in one of the stories, where we see a lot of the washing of the hands and the scrubbing, and it just never doesn't look pink, like pink paint. But maybe that was just, I always wondered if old movies used really bright, fake-looking blood because it was, it was less disturbing or something. But pretty gory, aside from that. Like, so there were some pretty good fates. Ronald, did you have a favorite segment or anything, you would want to say even about the wraparound?
The best wraparound, one of the best wraparounds I've ever seen for an anthology, to be honest. Like, it just was simple. They came into the cave, and I liked that it wasn't like, he didn't say like, here's a tale about it. Literally, they were talking, it cut to the story. It was really fast paced. I really enjoyed that. And all the stories, I mean, call me silly, I really didn't think that these were all people that had suffered the fate of being in this. But you recognize the people. I didn't really look at everybody so much, But I really thought, man, people really dressed up back in the day just for casual things. I missed that. I missed seeing that in things where people just had suits on and things just to
You're right,
just to go in
Ronald.
the dirty
If
caves.
I was gonna go tour the catacombs, I'd probably be wearing like jeans and sneakers and like a fleece or something like that.
You wouldn't wear slippery Earls and a double-breasted suit to go into the cave, but for some reason these characters did. I just really thought that the stories were really interesting. I think my favorite was probably the blind one, probably the blind hospital. The blind living facility. I mean, look, this guy asked him once, and he's like, "Look, it's gonna fix the you gonna fix the heat. Look, y'all gonna fix the."
That's a story called Blind Alleys, and it's taken from Tales from the Crypt 46, which was from February to March of 1955. So that was from an issue of Tales from the Crypt. I would agree. That was definitely the most intricate.
Yeah. But in general, I just liked them. I liked them all. I thought that they were really well done. And again, I liked that they were just like they ended. Sometimes they blended in so quick. I didn't even really know that we were going from one story to the other. Like there wasn't any like wild wave to transition it. It was just like next story.
Well, they would go to the little interlude, and then that would be it, right?
But yeah, I thought it was a great movie, man. I really enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun. I admittedly, I don't know that I ever knew this existed prior to me picking it. And
oh no.
Yeah. And so I mean, this was like a nice surprise to me, and these anthology type things. I kind of am in general, I'm a big fan of this kind of thing. The idea of 5 stories plus the whole wraparound being in there for 90 minutes. It's like so efficient. It's like a bunch of little episodes like of Twilight Zone or some crazy thing like that. I love that kind of format. But yeah, I thought they were all, I thought all of the stories were interesting enough. I personally like the Poetic Justice one the most, which was the one with like the Valentine.
That was dark.
I just thought that was like, yeah, exactly. That was just kind of dark and mean and just I love.
That was the meanest one. And that guy, the mean guy in the blue sweater, just like look, and it's so snarky, and like even like the relationship between him and his dad was so like there was something sort of funny and yet also really creepy about it. The way the dad clearly was not as nasty as the son, or at least maybe I think that was a father and a son.
It was, yeah.
But the dad was not doing enough to, for one thing, he raised this monster, and also he's kind of enabling him in this strange way. But Peter Cushing was great in that, like
so good,
like genuinely heartbreaking. Like the scene where he gets the Valentines and he sees that everyone, comes to think everyone in the town hates him, like. Yeah. I mean, honestly, what a brutal story that was, and in terms of how the guy decimates him. And that's totally, let's see, when that's from 1952, from The Haunt of Fear, that story. So yeah, that one totally felt like one of those, if you've ever read those comics, because they have a real mean streak in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that. And like it really made you wallow in how nasty, like how much the comeuppance was deserved by this guy.
Yeah, and I just love the, anything where it's like a year later on Valentine's Day, it's those pieces of like the jumps and even these little short stories are so fun, and the little note and how it cuts to the last word, with the heart inside. It was,
and the wishes
I love that kind of stuff.
The wishes one with I was like, man, come on, like
is that the
one where the guy
Wish You Were Here is the name of the story.
Wish You Were Here.
That's kind of like supposed to be like the monkey's paw, right?
Like it's even a reference in the story to that. Like they do it. But no, I like that one too. But I did find it kind of funny that she was like, I want him back the way he was immediately before the accident. And you're like, lady, you don't know what was going on right before that. Yeah. And then, like, I don't know. I just thought it was funny how much she couldn't get the wish right. That she kept wishing the wrong thing. That had the other line that I considered as my quote at the beginning, which is he says, every piece of him is alive still, alive and suffering.
Just embalming fluid running through his body. Like, come on, this is torture. The first wish was crazy because, like, when the morticians came into the, I'm like, what the hell is going on? And he was just like in the casket. That was nuts, man. And it was like I did enjoy the, again, there's like a no special effects. It just was like,
Yeah.
hey, somebody's coming into the room. You made a
Well,
wish.
even the
What's
Peter
happening?
Cushing zombie, that when he came back, his
Yeah.
eyes were like fabric, but they tried to create like an empty black socket. It worked. I
Yeah.
mean, it was creepy.
Yeah.
It's like it was lit a little too brightly for you not to see that it was fabric, but it was still like you said, Ronald, like a physical design that gives you the effect of deep eyeless sockets, which is creepy, you know.
It's really creepy.
I have to say one of my favorite moments is I just love the little girl letting Santa in. I just think that's such a good like stinger to that story. The mom like opening, going in there, and the little girl's like, "See, Mama, I let him in," and Santa's there. I just like, because that I don't know if it comes across as much. I feel like I've read that one, and I think in that one it's very clear that like she would call the cops because the killer's there, but she can't because she just killed her husband,
Right.
And I don't know if it came across in this as much, but I just remembered liking that setup of like someone who can't call the cops, who needs to be able to call the cops. And I don't know, when I was a kid, so many of those like stories like that would be creepy and disturbing to me because of the basic setup of an insane killer has escaped. And you hear about it on the radio. That's such a just a bone simple setup. But I think mixing that with the Santa thing and the murder thing, it was just a nice little scenario.
That one's really good. Now, actually, it's funny watching that again, not really realizing that this was maybe even a movie. I realized that that's actually one of my favorite episodes of the actual Tales from the Crypt series. Mm-hmm. So the first season, episode 2 of Tales from the Crypt, they redid this story. Zemeckis, Robert Zemeckis directed it. Fred Decker co-wrote it. But it's like one of the best, one of my favorite. Like I remember watching it as a kid and being like, "Holy shit, this is scary."
Oh,
and
man,
it's really, really that. I mean, this one was good in this anthology, but that episode of the show, I'm trying to think. Mary Ellen Trainor plays the wife. Larry Drake, who like Dr. Giggles, a lot of the horror fans, Dr. Giggles.
Right.
He was Santa. Like, it's so good. Like, Ronald, if you like that episode or that story in this film, like them redoing it as season 1, episode 2 of the series in the late 80s, it's so creepy. It's so good. And that scene, like when the girl's like, "Look who I let in," like that thing that John just said. It's like chilling when that hits in that episode. It's so good.
This was my favorite shot.
Yes.
Falling into the pits of hell.
No, I remember that. I remember that Zemeckis directed episode 2, Steve. It was a big deal that it was like Zemeckis was doing that, and it was really good. And I also remember from the comic, like I remember the drawing from the comic of her like saying, "Look, Mommy, I let Santa in," and I remember it from that. So that's probably why that moment is so iconic to me. But it's just a good like. It's just like a good stinger. I don't know. There's something about that moment that's just so you're fucked. That's. Yeah. You've tried to protect yourself from this moment this whole time, and now you're fucked.
There's something about when people are enclosed in a space, and they're like, "You don't know why you're here."
Yeah,
that fucks with me so bad. It doesn't matter how tacky or corny it is. Tales from the Hood did it with the two guys. Welcome to hell. Still, there's something about when somebody's in a space and they're like, "Oh man, that's a crazy stat." You don't know who I'm talking about. And then the whole, oh man, that breaks my heart every time.
Or when you hear a story about the other guy and you're like, "Man, you're fucked. That's crazy." And then they're like, "Oh, crazy. Really, Ronald? What about you?" And then it's like, oh, shit.
The tale of your life.
What do they know about me?
Yeah. Oh God. Okay, so episode. And All Through the House is the name of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually have Tales from the Crypt on my server. I'll
Oh,
check it
nice.
out.
Yeah, watch that one.
It might be fun to figure out. I don't know. We can watch a few of those or something. I don't know. It'd be fun to
Oh, that'd be fun, man.
to do instead of a franchise watch along episode, maybe cherry pick some Tales from the Crypt episodes or something like that.
Maybe we could do maybe we can have 3 that we know, and then we could do a randomness, a season.
We each pick one and then do a randomizer or something like that.
Yeah. We each pick one and then have a random episode. That would be so fun. Because I haven't seen these in so long, man. I haven't I remember one about a kid with a basketball. It was a kid that got somebody threw a basketball at him and he fell down the steps. I don't know. Broke his legs. That's scary.
Yeah, I do remember that in the basement, right?
Yes.
He falls down the basement steps.
Stop, Steve. Stop.
I remember that one.
I'm scared just thinking about it.
Dude, I love that show.
That show was so good.
Talking about it makes me realize that it was so much of what I like about anthology shows. Yeah. And it just had that general thing of it was horror, so you knew you were going to be, it was going to be what I just said. It was going to be some comeuppance or some, you fucked around and found out kind of thing.
Fitting Punishment, Ronald, that's what it's called.
What?
Fitting Punishment, episode 12, season 2.
He was too big for the casket. It cut his. Oh,
yes.
Jesus Christ, man! That's.
I think that's a classic story, but maybe that's a classic just from the comic.
It probably,
but it might be based on a short story. I think some of them were, based on old...
This one is. It says Vault of Horror number 16, comic source. I don't know. Yeah, this is a whole rabbit hole we could fall down.
Yeah, no.
I mean, this movie was a lot of fun to watch. I mean, again, without knowing it even existed, to be honest with you. So I mean, it was cool to go back, and especially to recognize that the first story, is something that I remembered very, very clearly from my childhood in the late '80s. But yeah, good pick, man.
Well,
I really enjoyed that.
Ronald, it would normally be your choice next, but I have something I want to throw out there because this right now we're sitting in the middle of episode 438.
Okay.
Next week or next episode is 439. That's my 400th episode.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
I'm taking over. the format. I've got two segments in mind that'll probably give us enough to chatter about for a full episode, and I think it'll be fun. It'll be a nice little surprising week for you guys. You'll just show up. You'll be just as surprised as you were 400 episodes ago when I showed up with all my thoughts about. Do you remember the movie? What was the first movie? What did you bring me in to talk about? This is a good trivia question for listeners.
Can you give us a hint?
I guess I thought the hint would be that you were like, this is a good one to bring me in for.
You're like this will be the one.
I don't know.
I'm trying to think of something that even came from that episode. Oh, but yes, the Dark Knight Rises.
Oh,
right, okay.
Oh, wow,
cool. Very cool.
So yes, but Ronald, let's give him. We're not recording next week, right, Steve?
Right.
So if we're not recording next week, and then we're doing a mystery, Johnny's 400th, my 400th birthday, for the next episode, 439. Mm-hmm. What is our required viewing for episode 440 coming up in 3 weeks?
Okay. The Lucy Lawless directed documentary Never Look Away about CNN camerawoman Margaret Moth.
Oh, yeah.
This thing looks and sounds nuts. I saw her speaking about it on Inside of You, the podcast. Michael, it is
Rosenbaum?
Yeah, Rosenbaum. Yeah. Crazy episode. It seemed tense at first, but then they really liked each other. It's just two people just kind of circling each other at first, and then Lucy's just a strong person, has a lot of opinions, and this just feels like one of those ones that I should see, and that you should see as well. Never Look Away. It is available on where you can find all PVOD stuff. It's not on anything for free right now. But yeah, that gives you 2 weeks to purchase this thing, to rent this thing or purchase it. $4 on everything, pretty much. Never Look Away, 2024.
Cool.
Michael Rosenbaum. Yeah, you're right. That is his name.
Love his jingle.
Inside of You is brought to you by.
He doesn't.
I love his little tags for all their ads.
Yeah,
I do like that podcast.
He doesn't know how successful he is.
Oh, that was a real song. I thought you were just singing.
No.
Oh no, that's his.
Inside of You. Yeah,
he does have a band that he plays in, but he does like this little jokey intro.
Yeah. Inside of You is a crazy name for a podcast, and
I dig it.
Yeah,
I dig it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think we're going to talk about Severance a little bit, and then that'll be an episode. So we finally got to watch episode 1 of season 2 of Severance with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Despite Ronald's best efforts to try to change that and let us
man.
Let us talk about more than one or something like that. I don't know, or see more than one, but that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, so we're talking about this one. This episode's going to come out when people will be able to see the next one. So that's just like we're watching. We're not even watching it with you all out there. We're behind. We're behind listeners.
We're watching with talking behind.
Yes, talking behind. We hate to watch you watch, but we love to listen to you walk away.
Oh man, it feels like I got like the first thing I felt sitting down to watch it, like as I got Aaron caught up and we watched it together. I was like, it is insane that it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, it's like for all the talk, whatever show you want to mention, like Stranger Things, what we talked about before,
Game of Thrones.
A lot of these shows that just take so long to be made. They were making season 1 during COVID, and then season 2, still probably, COVID stuff, the writer's strike, director's strike, all the things that happened in that period of time. That it kind of weathered, but also just like development. It seemed like it took a while to kind of get this season cracked. But I don't know. I just like it leading up to watching it. I also went back and rewatched the first season. Odyssey has a new podcast, the Severance podcast with Ben Stiller and Adam Scott.
Yeah.
They do. I listened to their recaps of each episode, and I've been listening along this season so far, just to kind of really completely immerse myself back in the show that I remembered, just completely being in love with, and still. But I mean, at the end of season 1, it was like, wow, this is like a real good show. Like this is a legitimate show that I can't stop thinking about. So yeah, getting into it was like that was the first thing that hit me, was like, not only did I know we've been trying to get the screeners, for a while, but even longer than that, this show has been coming for 3 years for a second season. It's like it's amazing that it's finally here, and they rolled out the red carpet and pulled out all the stops to try to promote, make sure people knew that this season was coming out, marketing wise and everything. Like they set up those central Grand Central things in New York where they actually had the cube set up with the actual actors in there working as if they were in Lumen. But it's just a really exciting kind of to jump back into a show. Like when we did our look aheads for 2025, it was like this was one that was going to be on my list, or was like an honorable mention, but it was coming so soon. Like I was like, I really just, I know I can get it next week.
I had the same thought. Like I think that it was like
on my list.
Right, looking forward to it didn't seem as relevant because we were about to get it. But as far as like if you had said late last year, what are the big projects coming next year that you're excited 100%. About? I think for all the reasons you just said, this was a big discovery sort of when it happened. I think we're all kind of Stiller heads, and to some degree, we all appreciate or love some aspect of Ben Stiller and his his career, and like I'm a huge fan of Adam Scott. I love him in like Parks and Rec, but I also thought he was the best thing about, a few of the little indie movies he was in. And then I've loved the podcasts he does with Scott Aukerman, where they talk about, every album by a given band. And then he also has always been on Comedy Bang Bang, and he's just one of those guys. So yeah, no, I Zach Cherry's amazing. John Turturro. I don't know. There's just so many great things about this show. It's sort of immaculately made. It's such a specific show. The way the details are rolled out, the way the images are rolled out. It's so specific and so agonizingly made that it almost has it can almost be inert, or you would never say like lifeless, but I mean, it can sometimes feel like it's really putting you through these moments. But these awkward, weird things happen because we spend so much time like on a close-up of somebody's face while they go through different emotions, or while they try to keep their emotions in check or something. There's so many interesting choices. And I think maybe once we've seen more of this season, we can talk more about what they mean. But I just think it's one of those shows where even if there's moments where I'm like, what's happening here? Why are we watching this? Why do I care so much about this scenario that is not even defined as life or death necessarily? You know what I mean? You're not really clear on what's happening. But like, what gets me is the fact that I don't think it's had a single moment that feels to me like a moment that I have gotten from another show. You know what I mean? The dynamics, it may remind me of things, but it's just so specific. So like, even the things people say to each other, they can be odd and awkward in a way that's just unusual. And it's not a show that I've seen before this one. So I'm definitely engrossed. I'm kind of like you said, Steve, like, for me, it was a matter of kind of getting back into it. And within just a few minutes, I was like, oh, okay, cool. We've got another season of this now. We can enjoy this. And it's a little bit more fun knowing you're going to get more. I wonder how many seasons they plan to make of this. It's way more mystery than it is information, But there've been so many shows that have played with that particular kind of fire that I would hope that they have like a good storyline worked out, because that would be one of the only disappointments of this show, would be if they did start quote unquote revealing things and it felt sort of basic, because right now it's kind of anything but basic. It's just a very unusual, like, terrible things seem like they really could happen at any moment, but you also feel like the characters are in there's a kind of safety to the world, or control or something of the world that they're in. Just a really interesting show. What about you, Ronald? Have you been kind of missing it? And did you enjoy going back to the office?
I did enjoy the show so much, and I did miss it a lot. There's something about like Lost is what comes to mind when I think about the layers of crazy packaging with branding and stuff like that. But we've gotten more information in this first episode than we had. It feels like quite a bit into Lost, which is really cool that we have some of that stuff. But the more information you find out, the further you feel away from the truth.
Well, you don't know if you can trust the information at all. Like, this episode was totally in the inside world, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was nothing outside in this one. So we don't have any reason to believe anything that Milchick is telling them about what's happening outside.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to think he's telling them the truth, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and just the fact that we saw this newspaper article, like, it's like all this stuff. It's like, what is happening right now? It almost feels too put together. It's almost like he was like, so what if they ask this? What if he asks this? What if he asks this? What if he asks this? He has everything prepared, which doesn't feel. He didn't skip a beat, like typically when you ask somebody something and they're digging in their memory, or, I'm not quite sure. He had an answer for everything. So I'm on your side with that. Everything feels a little put together in that way. But I mean, this is an incredible show. And I love that once you find out the rules, it expands a little bit. So you you leave out, you do this, and then you find out another layer, and then you find out another layer, and then it opens up. You're like, well, this painting means something, and then the painting changes. You're like, well, what the fuck? What's happening right now? So it's really cool. And then I'm wondering if certain characters are in character when they're there.
Okay,
Are they?
let's talk about that. I think there's
Yeah.
one character that to me seems very clearly like there's a likelihood perhaps that they are not,
They're in character.
that they're their outside person coming into the inside to pretend to be the inside version, right?
Yeah.
I mean, did you get that vibe from? Skip ahead, folks, if you don't. But did you get that vibe from Helly? I got that vibe from Helly. That Helly was like, her reactions to everything was like she was a person who was trying to fit in with what was being done and what was being said. And and we know that she lied about her
What she was doing.
her experience in the outside world.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
see.
just thought that was an interesting mystery for me. That like I was
Do
like,
they
oh, okay,
throw-
I hadn't even considered it. And then she was so weird with him in the hall that I was like,
Yeah.
she doesn't quite seem like Helly, but she also does seem like you almost feel bad for the predicament that she's in as far as the sort of potential romantic triangle that's developing. It's like that's a tricky situation for someone to be
Yeah.
a bifurcated person and for you to believe that one half of them is lovelorn for somebody and the half that you know doesn't care about that. That's just that's a hard thing to accept, you know. But I remember that was one of the best things about the first season was the ramifications and manifestations of this simple idea of that you can split your life between the two places and they won't know about each other. Like there's still ripples of that idea that they can explore, you know, and I think that's one of them. Is like, oh, what if you love somebody on the inside and you love someone else on the outside? We see that already with Bert and Irving too. So
Yeah. Helly is a character. Like
I love her.
Yeah, she's like, it's just energy about her, man. It's just, yeah.
I thought Zach Cherry was great. I thought he was very funny. He had a couple of great moments. The moment where where in the little film they made with the claymation versions, his guy like he eats a snack and it goes like whoa, like he had this. They didn't overdo it, but it cut to him and he's like you could see he's like wanting to say, but that's not how I act, you know. But it's like I like to think that Ben Stiller being so funny knew we don't have to have him say that's not how I act. You could just cut to him like going, but like he was totally like. But also I loved his whole thing about like, oh, we're famous on the outside? Did they say that like one of us is like the star?
Yeah, he's good, man. He's so good.
He's so
and his
good.
scene with Dylan.
Oh, that was a great scene. Yeah,
in the hallway was great, and you know,
well, that's what I mean too. Like they have a hug and they talk,
yeah.
but it's an unconventional scene because they hug for a long time, and we stay on his face for so long. It's not even like a hug that I've seen shot this way before, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I loved the sweetness of that moment between them.
yeah. And Irv saying, "I'm your favorite perk." That was such a great scene.
Yeah.
Like in a moment where he was so vulnerable and just like kind of done. It's to kind of turn around and kind of see that little smirk on his face. It was a really good scene. Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like there's so many great characters on the show. I mean, you know, I think we haven't seen her yet, but you know, obviously she kind of looms over this episode. But Cobell and Milchick and
Her name.
Milchick.
Yeah.
I love he can't get her name off the screensaver.
the screensaver.
That would bother me too, though. By the way, I would not want to come
It's the
in.
little things.
Yeah.
It's the little things that matter. But I don't know. I just feel like I'm really curious to see like what comes up with her and what her play is in all this because, you know, what he's doing with them when they all come back together and they see this video and, you know, you have like this Lumen is listening slogan in the video and you can tell that they've, you know, it's like the double meaning of like we're listening to you as your concerns, but we're also literally listening to you as you can hear like audio clips in the video and like the reenactments of like what actually happened inside of, you know, the Innie's experience. Like that all just seems like Cobell's like the playbook that we kind of felt in the first season. And even the way he's treating it, I was reading this article it was talking about that last season there's like a line that she told Milchick, and I went back and found the episode. She tells him the surest way to tame a prisoner is to let him believe he's free. So like that whole back end of the episode, you know, really kind of felt like that was a learned lesson from the first season, and you know what comes of Milchick and what, you know, where that goes is interesting, and I can't wait to see where we end up there. But even the new character, you know, what's her name? Miss Huang. Miss Huang.
Yeah.
You know, like the child.
Why are you a child?
Why are you a child?
Or why is she a child? Bob Balaban was
so
great in that little
shockingly young
role.
for a Lumen employee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just like,
and she's not your friend, Steve. She's your supervisor.
Yeah. Oh.
Holding on his face while he like checks his rage and says 3 friends. It was such a great little beat.
Oh man, so good.
It's just a peculiar energy, though. Do you know what I mean? Like,
really
I think
is.
a lot of it comes
really
from
is.
Ben Stiller being a funny guy, but also kind of a bitter guy and kind of there's a sharp edge to him or something. I think there's an acerbicness to this world and almost a darkness to it that I think feels like it's just aesthetically ingrained into the world of this show. It's not totally mean-spirited, but it does have like an unflinching quality to it somehow. I don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing I thought, and I think I'm resolved to it now, because the way the show plays it, it is the next minute for any Mark. But at first it seemed odd to me not to pick right up with the end of the last season because that was such a climactic moment. But in a way they did. Like, for all practical purposes, when the people are back in the facility is when they have their next moment. All those people... All
That's
those
what it
people,
felt like.
But it took me a minute did it take you a minute to sort of sort out the ramifications? Oh, that's how it works. And oh, I see. Yeah. If they haven't been inside Lumen in this time, then they haven't been able to pick up from that. It's like they were in the same situation we are. If they're outside, they don't get to pick up on that moment of the information they carried inside either. So, but I don't think there's a problem. It's fine for the show to feel mysterious, but I wonder if that could have been illustrated clearly enough to make you like, it's almost like they needed to replay the end of the season and then just build on it and then show us that like 5 months later I don't know. I think I was able to piece it together. It works. It's just it took me a minute, and it blunted the effect of coming back just a tiny bit when I spent a few minutes going, wait a minute, what's going through his mind right now? But when he's like running around the building in that one opening, which was really interesting and cool, like and he said he was inspired by Tom Cruise, by the way.
I saw that.
His run.
I saw that.
But in that moment, he's just lived through the moment of saying she's alive, of seeing the picture and all that. So I just think they could have connected that dot more to make you realize this isn't somehow 5 months later for him, you know. But either way, it was. I'm glad it's back, and I'm glad that they don't have to decide what you said, Steve, which is like how do you do a second season to a show like that? What do you play with? You know what I mean? And I think that like this show does feel like it's expanding, but it also feels like it's drilling into some of the things that we were wondering about last time.
And I feel like they sort of try to, or they definitely, maybe not directly to your point, but they do address the idea of like the traumatic experience of the innie, in that like when they get in and out of that elevator, like nothing has happened. You know, like it's right back in it. Like when Adam Scott, or when he gets in when Mark gets in the elevator, and that like zoom shot, like where it kind of stays on his face, and like you see him like flip out and then flip
it's
right
almost
back
like
in, but
orgasm or rapid eye movement or something, where like the face even kind of wibble wobbles a little bit.
Right. Like it literally is like that's like a POV shot of like any Mark, and then you know that nothing happened at all in that moment, you know, in the time between, you know, even when he sends them out and back in, like it just and I know only because like listening to them talk on the podcast, like they talk for this episode, Ben Stiller was talking about the way they shot that, and you know, this rig that they had set up to kind of give that POV shot and like the shaking that you're talking about, to be very deliberate in the point you're talking about, which is that when they get in and out, literally it's like that's all they know, like that experience of like that bodily shaking or whatever, that brain wipe or the switch going off or whatever it is that it's doing. And I thought that was really cool because it doesn't really, even the first season doesn't really dwell too much on that idea. And even jumping into this episode, even though Milchick talks about 5 months having passed and all that stuff, and he clearly just comes in running, looking for her, and that whole room has been changed over because it has been 5 months, but he has no relevance to that, or that has no relevance to him. And I don't know, I just really like that shot in the elevator where it kind of stayed with him in the elevator, because we haven't really seen that before. in the show to this point.
Yeah, that's true. I wondered if that was a new image. I couldn't remember.
And it just kind of really kind of gives that perspective that you're kind of speaking on, which is that, you know, in and out of that elevator, there's no life, you know, there's a complete lack of control. And that's the trauma of, you know, whatever's going on with these innies, you know, and that's kind of that's the big drama of the show, which I think makes it so interesting. And yeah, what they learn and how they kind of map it together is really cool. I can't wait to see more. So it is an example of a show where, you know, the week to week stuff is exciting, but it, you know, it would be cool if you could watch them a little. Would it be cool? I don't know. Maybe I'm just spoiled, but it's like I want more of it as soon as the episode ends, you know?
No, I definitely, for some reason, thought we had 2 episodes. I thought they did a 2. I thought
Apple
they did a 2
does that a lot with a lot of their stuff, like especially the 30-minute like sitcom type stuff, or even like, you know, Shrinking. Like they usually launch with 2, maybe even 3 sometimes episodes. But I think with a flagship show like this, a show that they really are trying to make their, you know, their flagship show,
right? They know.
Drama. Yeah, they know, like we can dole this out slowly, kind of keep it going, especially also for like Emmy stuff. So, but yeah, man, I can't wait to watch another episode this week. By the time this comes out, we'll hopefully have checked out another one.
They could have just released an episode that makes everything we're wondering about sound stupid. So if if that happened, we're sorry. We can't. We tried to get special treatment from Apple TV Plus. But we couldn't. What I didn't like, Ronald, was they said, get back with us closer to the release of the show. And it's like, just tell us no.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's crazy. That's been the vibe the whole time.
Just tell us no.
We've been championing your shows forever.
Yeah. We did get in early.
We did.
Second season comes and they're like,
movie hoovie? That's what they said to me.
Who are you? Oh, man.
Or Hoovie Schmovie? I don't know which one.
Can't wait for more Severance, that's for sure. And you know, if you love this show, I would definitely recommend checking out that companion pod that they have out, because I think they're going through the whole season week by week and doing those episodes with a lot of like behind the scenes stuff. They got, you know, the actors and actresses, like everybody involved with production design on that podcast too, talking about the making of it. So it's a really fun listen too.
Did you see that guy make that half court shot and hug
run up and hug Ben Stiller?
So good.
Did he win a car?
That's right. Yeah, they were
sitting on a car, right?
Yeah,
that's crazy, dude.
He's like Ben Stiller. He's like
Ben Stiller's all over social media this week,
right? It like accidentally went viral again. It's like that.
Well, yeah, and even sadly, they're talking about the passing of David Lynch earlier. I saw one of the group interviews they were doing as the Severance team, like the entire cast. I forget where they were. It might have been like, I don't know if it was like Graham Norton. It was a pretty popular interviewer or host, but like it's when the news broke about David Lynch's passing, and like he like told them during the interview.
Oh,
and like Jesus. I think like Adam Scott specifically and Ben Stiller were just like obviously shook. And Patricia Arquette was there, and she worked with him, and they were talking to her about him. It was a very like in the moment, like breaking news, weird thing.
Wow. So
just to tie this episode together, there it is, right there. It all comes back to David Lynch and Severance.
That's wild.
And social media. Cool, man. Well, that's fun. Again, next week we're taking a break, but the following week will be the John Takeover episode, which is going to be a mystery box. We'll call it the mystery box of John, or John's mystery box.
Dick in a box, but I'm the
I was going to say the first step is you get a box.
And you cut a hole in a box.
And then, so that'll be fun. And then again, Ronald, what was your pick for that'll be episode 440? Which one is that? What was the name of that the doc again? The Lucy Lawless doc?
I don't know. I don't know, man. I just got a weird text. I gotta go.
Never Look Away is the doc for Ronald. You're welcome.
Sorry.
And that's available on all the PVOD if you want to rent it and check it out for a couple bucks. Movieschmovie.com is the website. YouTube.com/movie podcast is the video option. If you want to do the YouTube channel, you can subscribe to either. You can watch, listen, do it all. There's options all over the place for you. And if you do
lick
subscribe,
the screen, taste it too.
I didn't say do that, but
do it.
Yeah, I didn't say that.
I said do it.
If you subscribe, we really thank you. And if you could leave a review or a like or whatever is available for you on the platform of your choice, we would really appreciate it. But thank you so much for listening. And as always, you made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
We insist that you lick your screen. All three of us.
I do not support this message.